On the program today, we look at the National Budget 2020. How are the expectations coming out from people in Zambia? And we also get a review on how these budgets were churning out as a country. Are they tallying with development plans as well as development documents such as the 7th National Development Plan? PEP Zambia is in studio with us. They break down for us entrepreneurship versus sustainable development. It will be very interesting to hear what they have to say on that one. Zambia Airways cabin crew gets training from Ethiopia. We get details on that one as well. And the Private Sector Development Association encourages local suppliers to maximize on the increasing supermarket outlets in Lusaka as well as across the country. These and more items on the program. This is Business Day and I am Judy Ngulube. We start off with a chat from PEP Zambia. Now, we know that the private enterprise program here in Zambia really does emphasize on issues of sustainable development. And from there, I have Namaya Lewanika, who is going to give us details and an insight of what PEP thinks about enterprise versus development, sustainable development. How are you? Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really glad to be on the show today and to talk about enterprise development as well as sustainable development and how they really can work together for the better of our country.
Okay. When you talk about sustainable development in a developing country, third world country like Zambia, just how big of a deal is it?
It's a massive deal, actually. It's a massive deal in any country, but for a third world country, even more so, because we really have an opportunity to take advantage of developing ourselves in a sustainable manner. And of course, at the center of any country's economic development is enterprise and the private sector. So if the private sector is going to be looking at sustainable development, it's quite critical. And a lot of these things, many of our countries, including Zambia, have signed up to through the Sustainable Development Goals, which are really an important target that was set by the UN, as many of you know, in 2015.
Okay. Just how does entrepreneurship take into consideration sustainable development?
Entrepreneurship should take into consideration sustainable development in terms of looking at the long term. And this is really critical. I mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. And a lot of times when people think about the Sustainable Development Goals, they think about the UN. They think about government, because obviously there are a lot of social issues around that. People talk about things like no poverty, zero hunger. People talk about the environment, clean water, and hygiene. And those sound like very social issues. But really, at the center, if any one of us, any country is able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, private sector has to be at the center of it. Because if private sector, on the other hand, is not working towards sustainable development, then we will not achieve our goals.
Okay. When I spoke to Parkers a few weeks ago, and they were telling me how the numbers are steadily increasing in regards to how many businesses are, making their operations formal by registering with Parkers, getting ZRA on board as well. So the ones that you've come in contact with, do you think, as PEP Zambia, do you think these entrepreneurs are incorporating sustainable development in their businesses?
Yeah, so there are a lot of businesses coming up in Zambia, and I'm glad a lot of them are formalizing, which is a really positive thing. In terms of the businesses that we've come across a variety of different businesses, and I'm glad to say that a number of them are actually factoring in sustainable development in the work they do. Although I should say a lot of them, when we come into contact with, don't realize that they're actually doing that. So it's not intentional. And I think where we need to be moving to is for businesses and enterprises to really intentionally now think about sustainable development and how their business models can achieve, help achieve some of these sustainable development goals. And that's not to say if you're a business, you have to, because there's 17 goals, it doesn't mean you have to achieve every single one of them. It's really about integrating your business model with looking at long-term social and environmental impact.
So I'm sure somebody out there is watching and saying, wow, so I might actually be incorporating sustainable development with me not even knowing that I'm doing it. So maybe what is it exactly and how do businesses do this? Because I know some of the pillars of, one of the pillars of sustainable development is the issue of putting into consideration today, the generation today, and, make it sustainable for the next generation.
Yeah, and that's absolutely important. We should be thinking about things like that. And I guess sometimes a lot of us think in the short term about the now, but actually issues of sustainable development are affecting us now even if you look at issues of climate change. That's a now issue. And if we don't address it, that's going to become a bigger and bigger issue down the line. But you asked about how does a company know that I'm actually achieving or contributing to sustainable development goals or sustainable development generally. I can give you an example. Say, for example, there's a business that is deciding to process groundnuts into a porridge, all right? And they're getting into one of these big supermarkets and things like that. That's a good business model. But actually what they're doing is addressing issues affecting malnutrition, addressing issues affecting zero hunger. Another thing that they're doing is creating employment because they're working with large outgrowers who are supplying their business. So really a lot of the businesses that we come across are addressing these issues. But I think if we're more intentional about it, then we can achieve better results. And it's not really about diverting from your core business model, because the reason you're in business is to make money, but how can you make money while contributing positively to the environment and the society at large?
And I know as PEP Zambia, that's where you fit in the radar when it comes to startup and entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Yes.
But how exactly are you doing this?
So a number of ways. And in fact, I can talk about something that I'm working on directly now, which is the promotion of impact investment. One of the opportunities that is there for businesses that are in this space where they're actually looking at sustainable businesses is there's actually financing outside of Zambia that can come into their businesses. And all businesses say, look, one of my key problems is access to finance, right? And because to certain times the conventional financing more difficult to access, more expensive, but outside financing can actually be very helpful. And the impact investors, people who are looking at, can I invest in a business that has good social returns, that has good environmental returns, but also gives me financial returns? And this is very positive. If we get more of that money coming into Zambia and businesses actually having the opportunity to really grow and develop, then yes, we're able to create more jobs, and the businesses with specific sustainable development objectives are able to achieve them, and we're better off. And as PEP Zambia, we're actually promoting that. So we work with SMEs to basically get them ready to meet these impact investors, and we also work with Impact Capital Africa, who brings in the investors, and we bring them together, and investment deals are struck.
Okay.
And it's as simple as that, although there's a lot of background work behind that, because many of our SMEs are not necessarily ready. They're almost ready, but they can't have that conversation. So we work to making sure that they can have better conversations.
This sounds, Namaya, like, a win-win situation. I mean, there's an entrepreneur who's getting a profit, churning out some service or product, and then there's the policymakers and a developing country who are all going to benefit from this enterprise that is incorporating sustainable development. Which areas then does the concentration go on to in making sure that, the enterprise grows, the entrepreneur grows, there's an income, there's a profit, there's employment creation, as well as general development for a developing country?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical at each stage of development for a business. So, for example, if you look at the startup, even if they haven't yet started to make money or they have an opportunity to create a business model that can incorporate all those different things. But I think it's also recognizing what sectors give you the opportunities in this area. And I could highlight a few of them. For instance, if you look at the energy sector, there's lots of opportunity there. If you look at the health sector, even fintech or financial services, there's a lot of opportunity around those different sectors. Agriculture, agro-processing, and some of these sectors that I'm mentioning are actually sectors that our government has prioritized in the 7th National Development Plan. So that's a very nice fit in that sense. So policy can work together to making sure that these sectors are supported in that sense, but also being able to leverage external financing. But even internal financing, you'd be surprised that we've managed to test that there is an appetite for Zambians like yourself and myself to actually invest in our own businesses, even if it's small amounts, where we bring together money and say, look, I'm going to put in my 10,000 kwacha, you're going to put in your 20,000. You get a better return than it's sitting in the bank, for instance. But these are all things around policy. So we have to develop policies around it that will make things like that possible, like it is in other parts of the world.
Okay, this conversation could go on, but my next conversation probably with you will be on issues of policy and how favorable the environment is when it comes to just making all this better. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
All right, okay. I have been talking to Namaya Lewanika. She is coming from the Private Enterprise Program Zambia, popularly known as PEP Zambia, here in Lusaka, Zambia. You're still watching Business Day. The budget presentation is tomorrow. The National Budget 2020 is unveiled tomorrow by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Dr. Walia Ngandu. Now, we caught up with Augustine Mkamdawire, a development expert, on TV2's Morning Live program. We wanted to find out the expectations from the development experts end, from the economical end, on what are some of the things that the budget 2020 should concentrate on. We further spoke to him about how these budgets are tallying with development policy, how they are tallying with development plans, such as the National Development Plan, which is the seventh National Development Plan. We spoke to him earlier on, and some of the things that came out from Mr. Mkamdawire are that he expects a budget that is inclined towards austerity measures, and also will be increasing. It will be interesting, he said, to see how they will fit in issues of the 7th National Development Plan, specifically because this has been a challenge of late. The other things that Mr. Mkamdawire said should be addressed in the National Budget 2020 are issues of poverty for Zambia, issues of diversification in the agriculture sector, and also looking into the mining sector challenges, as well as those that have been just brewing of late. He also said the consideration should be taken into the current taxation regime. So that is what our development expert had to say in regards to the National Budget 2020, as well as its operations tallying with the 7th National Development Plan. But remember, I should remind you that the Pulse of Television will be carrying you live tomorrow from Morning Live, as well as a program that will give you a pre and post analysis of the budget 2020, starting from 10 hours. You're watching Business Day. Thank you so much for still watching Business Day. We now get to Zambian Airways and how their cabin crew is being trained in Ethiopia. The Zambian ambassador to Ethiopia, Mr. Emmanuel Mwamba, says that the re-establishment of the Zambian Airways will promote Zambian tourism and improve the country's intra- and intercontinental trade as well as tourism. Speaking when he hosted a dinner for 25-member Zambia Airways cabin trainee crew in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Mr. Mwamba said Zambia Airways had come at a critical time when Africa had just established the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, meaning that the acceleration of trade among African countries will now be possible. He said that the airlines is a key driver to Zambia's diversification and policy aiming at promoting manufacturing, industrialization, agribusiness, as well as tourism. He said that the airline was key in boosting both tourism and trade, as Zambia would have an opportunity to manufacture goods and transport them without challenges across the continent. Mr. Mwamba said the Industrial Development Corporation, which is IDC, should ensure that mistakes and bad business practices that saw the collapse of the previous national carrier were avoided. He further urged the staff that would be training at the Ethiopian Airlines Academy to work hard and focus on the training. The Industrial Development Corporation Human Resource and Administration Manager, Ms. Lizzie Mukwasa, said that the training of the Zambia Airways cabin crew in Ethiopia was a huge milestone as Zambia Airways prepared to launch at the national carrier level. She said that the Zambian Airways, with a tagline, "The New Wings of Africa," was a national pride aimed to restore Zambia's lost glory in the aviation industry. Congratulations to the crew cabin there that is being trained, and we hope they come back with something that they will add to the national airline. You're watching Business Day. Thank you so much for still watching Business Day. The Private Sector Development Association has encouraged local suppliers to take advantage of the increasing supermarkets that are opening around the country. He said that these supermarkets give an opportunity to the local suppliers to improve what they are producing, manufacturing, as well as increase an income, and is also one of the ways to increase employment at their various companies. Mr. Yusuf Dodia said this at the opening of Shoprite East Park recently. And Shoprite management did add their voice to this one as well, giving us a view of what their suppliers are offering them and how their operations are just going on with these local suppliers.
I think a lot of Zambian suppliers try to approach businesses like Shoprite with their products, but they don't understand that Shoprite is not an institution that will say, if you've got 1,000 head of cabbage in a field, they'll buy them all on that one day. Like any business, they would have to have a supply chain where they're buying a certain quantity on a daily basis, on a routine basis. And that it's not just quantity, but it's also quality. So I think the big challenge we have with most of our suppliers is recognizing that it can't be like a market store type of business. It's got to be something that is planned. It's got to be something that is maintaining a certain level of quality. And it's got to be something that has to be competitive. So I think for many of our suppliers, it would be useful for them to approach Shoprite and other similar stores and say, what are you expecting out of us? So that they learn exactly what the value chain supply system is all about and how they can fit into it. I think we have potential, I think there's capacity, but I think it's a bit disorganized. And the most important thing is to become organized and also to learn to collaborate. One of the big problems we have is you have a producer who produces a particular product, they want to go it alone. Yeah. Shoprite has just opened the 37th shop. We're told that the floor space is equivalent to 1,000 football fields. You tell me which one supplier can manage to supply even something as small as a loaf of bread to 37 shops. So it's a question of collaboration. I think a lot of our suppliers need to be able to say, look, I can't do it alone. Can I work with others so that we can create the volumes and we can make the commitments to a chain store like Shoprite and be able to say, we can produce for you a certain quality, a certain consistency, and timely, and making sure that our prices are competitive, because we're also working on economies of scale. So there's a lot for our small businesses to learn. The opportunity is there. It's a question of learning what it takes to be able to take advantage of that opportunity.
So let me just expand on what Mr. Dodia said. Is quite right. And if you see the trolley here, if you want to take a shot, every single item that is here is actually local. And I'm deliberately taking him to, to the success stories that are there. We've been around 24 years, and I've been with the company 24 years, and I've seen the change that's been there. When we started 24 years ago, we were 90 to 95% that we were bringing out of South Africa and the rest of the world. Only between 5 and 10% was local, because remember, we were coming out of the non-privatization era into the privatization era, right? 24 years later, we are up to 88% total trade, local. 47% of that is by agents who import for us, but we consider that as local trade because they employ 500 people, 50 people, 20 people, so, but they supply to us. Only 12% is what we bring in ourselves. Then the other 43, 44, 45% is what we buy totally local. One of the great success stories, so you talk about our relationship with our suppliers. We've got a supplier here called Buyabamba. We used to import potatoes. In the on-season, which is now between June and after the rainy just before the rainy season, we do not import potatoes. We buy from Buyabamba because they have the capacity, and the capacity has been developed by what he said. Buyabamba don't do it themselves. They have between 9 and 18,000 outgrower scheme farmers in the value chain that supply to them, and they pack for us and the rest of the market. I was just telling you an interesting statistics. 2 weeks ago, we did a campaign with Buyabamba. We sold 266, almost 260,000 potatoes. That's 19,000 potatoes daily in all our 36 stores across the country through these guys alone. And that's by the collaboration that he is speaking about. We worked with Buyabamba when they started. We gave them, here's the open market, guys, see what you can do, and that's what they've done. Trade Kings is the same story. Zambeef is the same story. I was speaking about, and I like to speak about Java Foods, the Easy Noodles is the same story. Many people think it's an imported product. It's not. They started 4 or 5 years ago with ourselves, Shoprite. They've grown to what they are now. They're seeking to see if they can go to outside markets. So we have a very, very good collaboration with a number of suppliers.
What would be your linkage to the would-be suppliers?
Quality. We look at your product. Quantity. 1,000 football fields in terms of trading space. You probably can't on your own supply that many football fields with products. So therefore, look at your quantity and see if you can link up with others so you can fulfill that demand. Branding and packaging. If you look at a number of the products, even if you turn your camera and see the meats here today, a number of these products, all of these actually are local. If you see them from a distance, you think they're imported, but that's because the guys have upped their game in terms of what packaging and branding looks like. I mean, if I didn't hold here, you would think this is imported. It's actually local. It's done locally, it's marinated, the packaging is very nice. It's done by Master Pork, which is a subsidiary of Zambeef. So branding and packaging. Pricing, very important. Many people want to make money today and tomorrow and then buy a Rolls Royce. But it comes with time, so keep your price. We prefer we buy from you today, we keep your price at that price for the next 3 to 6 months so the customer can benefit before you come to us and say, you know, I'm increasing my price, I'm increasing my price. So those are the heads up, if you want to call them that. If you come to us for business, just listen to the things that our chairperson for the private sector said today in his speech. Those things, quality, quantity, branding, pricing, and then cooperatives come together and you can supply these 1,000 football fields with product.
That item there wraps up Business Day for today. Thank you so much for having stayed with us. Join us next week at the same time, Thursday, 18:30 for more business items. On behalf of the entire production crew, I'm Judy Nguluwe.